Welcome to Liberated, a space to pause, breathe, and come home to yourself. This podcast is your sanctuary from the noise, a place to tune out the pressure, comparison, and chaos so you can tune into one very important truth: you are always enough. Each episode blends psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, and ancient wisdom to help you move past self-doubt and find peace in your own skin. So if you've been craving a space that calms your mind and reminds you of your power, you are in the right place. Welcome to Liberated. So excited to be here in this conversation with you and to kick off our journey together. So if you've been feeling stuck, maybe you've been into personal, emotional, or spiritual growth for some time, or maybe you're dipping your toes into this space, and perhaps you've read some books or you've listened to other podcasts. Maybe you've even gone to certain events and enlisted in programs. And maybe you've experienced some incremental changes in your life, but it still feels like you haven't realized the promise, or you've made it to the promised land as far as personal growth is concerned. You haven't felt liberated, possibly. And maybe you're still experiencing stress, anxiety, lacking clarity and direction. Or there's just more friction and resistance in certain areas of your life. That's really what we're going to be unpacking over the course of this journey together. And, I'm by no means liberated. I am on the journey and continuing to walk the journey alongside you as well. So I'll be sharing a lot more about my own journey and what's helped me navigate it as well. But for today's episode, I really want to just get down into the nitty-gritty of this question, which is, why don't you ever feel good enough? And, if you can be honest, like, how many times have you achieved something that should have made you proud? Something perhaps like you getting a promotion, or nailing that performance of yours, or speaking gig, or hiring an amazing team, or growing your business, or whatever it might be, new opportunities, new partnerships, etc. And it's something worth celebrating. But instead, you didn't allow yourself to experience the joy, the satisfaction, the fulfillment, and you moved the goalpost instead, and you focused on the next thing. And you still felt like you weren't enough. So all of the joy and the excitement of celebrating that moment and that achievement and milestone is actually kind of sucked out of that experience because of this constant feeling of being not enough. The truth is, it's not you not feeling good enough. This is conditioning, right? So you're not broken for feeling this way at all. I certainly felt like I was broken for a very long time. It's like, why am I continuing to achieve certain things, which we'll speak about shortly, which society deems as worthy or worth celebrating, and I still feel like I'm so behind. I still feel like I'm not enough. I still feel like I have so much more to do to somehow reach this illusory state of enoughness. But it's not illusory. This is conditioning, and it's such a widespread pattern among high achievers and high performers, which is formed at a very early age. And I really want to ground this in science. We're going to really be approaching this whole concept of liberation and liberating oneself from the self-imposed constraints and fears and doubts, beliefs through two lenses, both science and soul. But this feeling of not being good enough isn't who you are. It's what you were taught to believe by childhood conditioning. Maybe it was your mom, your dad, your grandpa, your grandma, and maybe it was your teacher or someone at school, society's expectations, and just a world that really rewards and celebrates and honors output and productivity over worth, over inherent worth. And psychology calls this conditional self-worth, the belief that your value is tied to what you do, not who you are. It's such a dangerous game. It's such a dangerous game. And it's like, man, I just went for so long through life, practically 30 years until recently, kind of being able to put a bit more distance between myself and this limiting belief and realize my inherent worth. Because for so long, growing up in a pretty tense household where there was a lot of fighting and a lot of disagreements, I felt like the only way that we could come together as a family was when I was achieving. Because if I would, for instance, get an A+ at school, or my parents would go to a parent-teacher conference and they would get some really stellar reviews from my teachers, it kind of gave us a reason to come together and celebrate. And, that validation just poured out of my mum and dad when I was winning. But I really was also criticized for not performing and matching their expectations, so to speak. So if I got like I don't know, an 18 out of 20, the next question would ultimately be, why didn't you get 20 out of 20? Or, how come Joe Blogs or whatever, in your class was able to get it, but you couldn't? So from a very early age, there was already a comparison with others, which makes so much sense because for so long as well, I would go on social media and just like look at all these other coaches and creators and business owners and be like, oh my God, like I'm so behind. I'm just not good enough. And it's so toxic. It was incredibly toxic. And whether it's the school system and just the hustle culture that's celebrated and promoted on social media, it's a very toxic game to play. And so that was kind of like my journey through school. It's funny, even like when I finished year 12 and I got, I believe like a really great score that I was happy with, my dad was like, oh, well, it's not a perfect score, but let's work with it. And I have nothing but compassion and love for my dad, having gotten to a place now where I understand that this has always been his way of expressing love for me, even though it's not in the way that I would prefer it, through the encouragement and support and validation that it's okay to be where I am. This is just his way of dealing with it. And it's actually like a blessing in many ways because, working through this unprocessed trauma that I had kind of carried for so long from parents and from their own challenges and adversities and hardships, and being able to transform them through the work that I've been doing and realize what these narratives are, which are really just that, then just narratives. And then that's why I'd say I think it's important to be able to have compassion for our parents or for those who perhaps have passed down these limiting beliefs to us, because ultimately they were doing the best with what the best they could with the tools they had and the level of awareness or consciousness they had at the time. So they really can't be held responsible for their level of awareness that they're oblivious to. I believe that if you're in this conversation with me, then perhaps you're in a similar boat and you're on the path to wanting to transform these limiting beliefs. And I would argue that actually having a bit of gratitude for them is one of the most powerful tools that has helped me really transcend them and liberate myself from them, and really having gratitude, for my parents and for these narratives that were passed down. So a little bit of a tangent there, but I thought that'd be worthwhile sharing, because I think by having gratitude for my limiting belief and the source of my limiting beliefs and how it's driven me deeper into this work to really heal and to become a better version of myself. I mean, that's such a positive aspect, and I wouldn't be the man I am today were it not for those limiting beliefs and were it not for the parents that I chose and all the rest. I might jump around a bit, so thanks for sticking with me. Now, I do want to kind of give you a little bit more of an understanding around my journey and how this feeling of not enoughness really, really grew over time and became really hairy and sticky, and it really dominated my life and created so much like crippling stress and anxiety and depression, and really what helped me, I guess, come out of that. So like I said, coming out of school, I had gotten marks that I felt proud of. I don't know if that matched the expectations of my parents. And then I kind of went through uni. I was studying biomedicine, and I don't know, like for a long time throughout that journey, I felt like I was really just producing to continue to try and match the expectations of my parents, because I didn't feel good enough. So I was outsourcing my enoughness to my parents through their validation. So I was hoping subconsciously that by, doing biomedicine and getting into medical school and becoming a doctor, and getting that approval and validation from my parents, that I would somehow, at some point in the future, I would finally get that feeling of being enough. So when I didn't get into medical school, it was pretty heart-wrenching. Not because I felt like I failed, it's because I felt like I failed my parents. And it was really, really messy psychologically for me to deal with. And yeah, I continued to reinforce that belief. You're just not good enough, David. You're just not good enough. And then I realized I didn't want to keep on trying to get into medicine, after coming to the realization that I wasn't actually doing it for myself. I was doing it for my parents. And that realization was certainly liberating. However, it still didn't shake this feeling of not enoughness, because, I was bouncing around different jobs in like research and medical administration. I was selling gym memberships at one point. I was at a pharmaceutical company, and I was bouncing around different jobs, and I wasn't lasting longer than like 6 to 12 months in each one, while others around me had settled into these like graduate positions and seemed to have, quote unquote, figured it out. Which, by the way, I think is just such a silly statement that we can drop, because no one's figured it out. We are in the process of figuring it out, all of us, even me. So I digress. Even, looking out at those around me, it seemed like they had figured it out, right? And I felt not good enough. And it kind of came to a head where, this crippling not good enoughness sent me into a really dangerous spiral of substance abuse, because feeling not good enough left this void within me that I tried to like fill with escapism and, partying and eating and drinking and drugging and, feeling that temporary high kind of fabricated this feeling of enoughness, fake feeling of enoughness. And it kind of kept me going for years, until eventually, I found myself pulled over by a drug bus. I tested positive for 3 different substances, not 1 kilometer away from a music festival, and I immediately lost my license. And I mean, that was just such a crippling, devastating moment in my life, which really hammered home this feeling that not only are you not good enough, David, you are bad. You are bad. And I was just so depressed, but that wasn't really the worst of it, because at the time I was working, as I mentioned before, at a pharmaceutical company, and that required me to drive around to meet with general practitioners to help them support their patients through our pharmaceutical interventions. And I, had lost my license, but I'd also gotten this really great job at a very esteemed pharmaceutical company with a great salary and great career progression. And I didn't want to lose that. And so I made a mistake. I made an error, but it was the error that I had to make because of the level of awareness that I had at the time, which was to continue driving on a suspended license, which caught up to me when I was pulled over speeding, and I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw the flashing lights and the sirens drowning me in my car, and feeling my eardrums with just shock and pain. And when the constable asked for my license and I couldn't produce it, I was sobbing uncontrollably, and I got sent to court, and I went to the magistrate's court, and I had to really face my demons in a very big way. And around that same time, I was also, I guess, in many ways, feeling uncertain about who I was. I felt like I was a danger to myself and to others around me because of what situation I'd landed myself in. And I was also trying to play the role of a carer for my dad, who had opened up to me beautifully, vulnerably, about his attempted suicide. And I was just like in a world of hurt. I mean, I felt so confronted by everything that was happening around me. I definitely felt like the world or God or the universe or whatever you want to call it was out to get me. And I didn't know what to do. And I think in many ways I tried to manage and process what I was navigating by creating. And when I say creating, I felt inspired to build a startup in the mental health space so that no one would ever have to experience that same level of suffering that I was going through, that my dad was going through. And I mean, it was so beautiful. It was a really impactful journey, and getting to build an app and to run workshops and to educate employees and tertiary students and leaders about how to have important conversations about mental health and just emotions, to really normalize that narrative and help future-proof people's mental health through helping communities of people feel seen and heard and held and supported. And yeah, I mean, it was so joyful and meaningful, and I realized what I was capable of, what I didn't know that I was capable of as well at the time. But in doing so, I realized something really insidious and really similarly confronting, because as we grew and reached a point where there was tension starting to mount between team members, and we reached sort of like a tipping point in terms of our growth and didn't really know what the next best step forward was, and ultimately having to make the difficult decision to shut down the business. I came to this conclusion that, oh my God, like I feel like I am nothing now without the title of being a founder or director, or whatever you want to call it, without a salary, without the achievements, without, speaking on stages, without having a team of, over 100 amazing, beautiful people. Without any of that, like I felt completely empty, and it felt like an ego death in many ways. And what it taught me was that I still was operating from this feeling of not good enoughness, from this insecurity and from this feeling of inadequacy. And while I was still building something really meaningful and very close to my heart that really served lots of people and, made a difference and an impact that I was and still am deeply proud of, there was still this like insidious, subconscious, subtle belief that you need to build this in order to escape the shame, to escape the guilt, to escape the world of hurt that you were in as a quote unquote degenerate, And that was confronting, but it brought me to where I am now. And I really want to ground this for you so that it's not just the David show for our time together, but really to kind of share with you some insights and distinctions and frameworks to really help you realize how inherently worthy you are. Because self-worth exists simply because you exist, right? Have you ever babysat like a newborn, or a young baby? And did you ever look at that baby and be like, or think to yourself that they had to earn your care and earn your approval to be enough? Of course not. That's ludicrous. Is there anything that baby would need to do to be more good enough, or anything that it would need to do or it need to stop doing to be more good enough? No, of course not. You look at that baby, that beautiful infant, that bundle of joy, and you see their worth instantly. And so then at what point did that baby of you stop seeing it? When did you stop from being this beautiful bundle of joy that's inherently worthy to not being good enough? What had to happen there, right? So that's something I want you to play with, because it's something that's really helped me and helped me speak to myself as though I am my own baby that I'm looking after. Kind of a funny concept to think about, but if you can, just something for you to try on, like a jacket, and see if it fits. The next time that you're criticizing yourself or doubting yourself or beating yourself up, just imagine that you are speaking to a version of yourself that is 1 or 2 or 3 years of age, right? Because those versions of yourself are inside you. So that's self-worth, right? You are inherently worthy simply because you exist, simply because you are here, simply because God or the universe or a higher power of your own understanding or your parents have created you to exist here. That's why you're inherently worthy. And self-esteem is subtly different. It's performance-based. So it rises and falls with your results, how you look, how you achieve, how others respond. And the distinction here, or the confusion between the two, is why high achievers or high performers or seekers or you feel empty. Now, you can have really great self-esteem through competence and a track record of success, but still have very low self-worth and still feel like it's never enough, which is why so many successful people are so depressed. So the reframe here is that you don't build worth, you remember your inherent worth, and everything else is just maintenance for self-esteem, right? Your worth is unchangeable. Your worth is timeless. It's boundless. It's abundant. And what happens here is you arrived here as this beautiful soul that is inherently worthy, and then early messages like you're too much, or you're only loved when you behave or achieve, as it was the case for me, or you need to work hard or you'll fall behind, which are just narratives, which is just language, which is just words, which are just sounds, vibrations. They create a core belief system that runs automatically inside you, right? And it actually shapes the lens through which you see the world. It's kind of like you're wearing these invisible glasses, but you forget that you're wearing them, So then when you receive praise from someone, it feels suspicious. Why are you so nice to me, right? I got that for a very long time. I felt that. And mistakes feel catastrophic. Like you slip up and you have a typo in a report that you submitted to your boss and they point it out to you and you feel like the world's crumbling down, right? But by adulthood, you're not reacting to the moment, to what's happening objectively. You're just reacting through that old filter. And until you make those filters conscious, until you awaken to those filters that are silently driving your life, then you'll keep recreating situations that confirm them, like I did, right? Like I did with, the medical pathway, like I did with the workplace, which I didn't talk about. But, just continuing to feel out of place in the workplace and dealing with, toxic bosses that would make my life living hell and bully and discriminate against me, like I experienced with the brush with the law. Until I made my filters conscious, I kept recreating situations that confirmed that I'm not good enough, that confirmed that I am bad. So awareness, everything we're talking about here, isn't therapy speak. It's the first act of liberation. This is why this is our inaugural episode together. This is why we're having this conversation from the get-go. So that's what I want you to think about, right? These filters that are silently driving your life. And what's more is this, another framework that might help land this is the hedonic treadmill, right? And what happens is the brain is very fast at adapting to reward. So you can hit a goal, you feel good for 24 hours, but then your baseline resets. And that's why your achievements in your work, getting a promotion, growing your business, writing more revenue, hiring people, partnerships, speaking on stages, right? They often feel fleeting. Like you're chasing dopamine, not fulfillment. And high achievers or high performers, they often mistake this temporary high for purpose. And they assume that the next promotion or the next romantic partner or the next project or next gig or opportunity will finally bring peace to their mind. But like I experienced, right? Like I'm on this path with you, no matter how much I achieved or no matter how much I strived, whether it was building my startup or at school or at university, right? I never felt truly at peace. And I truly believe that success without self-worth isn't success at all, because what's the point of achieving this thing if you're not even present and peaceful to enjoy it and to feel proud of yourself? If you experience a success in your life, whatever it might be, and you're not present for it, and you're beating yourself up or you're constantly looking at the next thing, what's the point? So, this reward system is designed for survival, not satisfaction. So if you don't anchor your progress to meaning, your brain is what will continue moving the goalpost. And you can't out-achieve an empty self-concept. What I've learned through my journey, that I've shared with you and through the phases of transformation that I've gone through is that lasting fulfillment comes from who you become in the process, not what you collect at the end. Right? It's not about the goal. It's about who you get to become in the process. I mean, I have gone through so many different iterations of myself, and it's been scary at first, scary shedding these layers, scary confronting the parts of myself that I'd kept hidden, scary letting go of old identities and relationships, sad. It's been a grieving process. It's been really difficult, but it's also been really beautiful. I've become more patient, more peaceful, more loving, more compassionate, more strong, more courageous. I would not be having a podcast 5 years ago. So, and I share this with you to offer a reference point for you to think about your life and not about the things that you collect, but about who you get to become in the process, right? That, as the GOAT, Tony Robbins, would say, the juice is in the growth of the person that you become, not the goal itself. And lastly, I want to land this in something that everyone can relate to, and I know you can relate to this as well, which is your inner critic, which is always there on your shoulder, telling you that you're not good enough, telling you that you're falling behind, telling that you're not as good as X, Y, or Z. And what I want you to understand is the inner critic isn't evil. It's a protective mechanism. It's not you, as we've discussed and established, but it formed early on to keep you safe from rejection or shame when you were young, when you were told that you're too much, or when you were told to, work hard or you'll fall behind, when you were told to be realistic instead of having big dreams. Now, this inner critic learned that if I criticize myself first, then no one else can hurt me. So I'm going to be the meanest person to myself. And that's how I can protect myself from others. Because if others say something bad to me, it's not going to be anywhere near as bad as the things that I say to myself. Right? It's making me emotional just thinking about it. But over time, that voice has become this automatic, unconscious, internalized authority, which is super harsh, which is super perfectionistic, with unrealistic standards, and which is relentless. And it's so much suffering. There's so much suffering. And the goal isn't to silence it at all, but to separate from it. It's to hold space for it and understand and see it as this protective voice. So, I'll say that I'm going to sit down and record a podcast episode, right? And then something comes up in my day that I hadn't accounted for. And I hear the voice like, but you said you were going to. And then over time, the voice has lessened for me. But when it first started happening, it was like relentless. But what's really helped me distance myself from it is acknowledge, all right, Dave, it's not bad that you didn't do what you said you were going to do today. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean you don't have discipline. It doesn't mean that you don't have integrity, right? It just means that you made space for what needed your attention today. And what's coming up is my protective voice. It's not my truth. It's not who I am. So even just in that act, use awareness and compassion. Name it. Give it a name. Charlie the critic. Connie the critic. Whatever you want to call it. Thank it for trying to help, looking out for you, and then redirect your attention to something else. Redirect your attention to something that feels good, that gives you joy, that brings you peace, right? And as I was saying before, right? And I'm by no means fully liberated from the inner critic. I don't want you to think that at all, right? But like I was saying before, the critic starts to lose its power, and certainly has lost its power for me when I stopped believing that its fear-based protective mechanism equals a fact, right? So it's not a fact that me being seen by lots of people on social media or through this podcast is going to hurt me or harm me. Even though my inner critic will pipe up and be like, I don't know. Are you sure you want to do that? You're going public with your story. You're opening yourself up. It's like, okay. All right, I hear you. I'm going to do it anyway because this is my truth. I'm going to do it anyway because I know it's going to help at least one person. I'm going to do it anyway because this is my mission. And so there are some real easy signs to look out for that I want to share with you just to really make it practical, to help you identify that you're stuck in the not enough loop, to help you identify these invisible glasses or the lens that are creating this or perpetuating this feeling of not good enoughness. And like it was for me, right? The one that immediately comes to mind is constant comparison, right? So you might be scrolling on social media, you might be comparing yourself to other people and their lifestyles and their exotic getaways and their massive followings and other business owners and coaches and creators and celebrities, whatever, right? And constantly feeling like you're not good enough or not doing enough or falling behind, right? I get it. Overworking, which, I experienced with my startup, really sacrificing hours of me time, sacrificing, sleep and health, and still self-medicating to try and cope with the amount of workload that I had signed myself up for and continue to subject myself to, even though I didn't feel good in my mind and body, which again is like just perpetuated by the hustle culture that's promoted online and this new like Navy SEAL mentality that's really like, you gotta, you gotta really suffer to experience success. I don't believe that. I believe that there's going to be pain along the way. Granted, I believe that there are things that might not go your way, but I believe that all suffering is self-made. You don't have to suffer to experience your success. I'm getting off track here. Thanks for pulling me back. People pleasing as well, so constantly saying yes to opportunities at work, even though you may not have capacity or you're burning out, constantly saying yes to events with friends and people who aren't really aligned in values, but there's a guilt there that exists because if I don't say yes and I feel like I'm letting this person down and I can't live with that guilt and it's a vicious cycle, but it's not the fact that you're trying to please people. It's the fact that you don't feel good enough, which, as we've established, isn't a fact. It is your conditioning. Fear of slowing down or resting. I was working with a client who tied her self-worth to the revenue that she was generating. And there were slower months throughout the year, and she made that mean that, or she made that revenue that she generated in those slower months mean that she's somehow not good enough of a leader and that she needs to be doing more. And she was afraid of slowing down and resting and giving herself some me time, even though she knew that it was the best thing for her. That's another one. Another one, which again, I can really resonate with, needing external validation, like through winning awards with my startup or generating revenue or speaking on stages or getting likes on Instagram, impacting people and like constantly needing that, validation, that reassurance, that reinforcement from the external that I'm doing enough, right? Again, it's not that it's bad or good. It's just these are the signs, the symptoms to look out for. Because then when you can acknowledge them, then you can have that awareness of this, this silent fear or limiting belief or idea that you're somehow not good enough, and you can transform it. Lastly, one that comes to mind is, difficulty receiving praise, difficulty receiving recognition at work, difficulty receiving a compliment from a friend and then deflecting. Right? Because then that reinforces not good enoughness. Someone who is firm and clear in their self-assurance and in their security can receive a compliment like, you're so kind, you're so compassionate, you look amazing today, and say, thank you. And that's it. And that's why I want to help you, if you can relate to any of those signs, to really break the cycle and work towards transforming this belief that you're not good enough without rushing the solution and just breaking it down, which I will strive my best to do in each and every episode, to give you some real tangible, practical examples of how to take perhaps some intangible or maybe even esoteric concepts so we can actually make it work for you in a really easily digestible and practical way. What I'd encourage you to start off with, as we've discussed already, is just awareness. So if you could relate to any of those signs, right? Chasing validation, difficulty receiving praise, overworking, fear of slowing down or resting, constant comparison, all those things. The first step is having the awareness to name that pattern, right? Just awareness. Name the pattern. Then you've already started the process of having it lose its power. The next step is compassion. Stop shaming yourself for having it. Stop shaming yourself for having it and acknowledge that it's not you. It's conditioning, which brings me to the next piece. So we have awareness, we have compassion. The third is separation. Acknowledge you are not the voice in your head. Notice when it arises. You're not good enough. I can't believe you're falling behind X, Y, and Z. And this person on social media's got this many likes and this and that. And then notice that and just be like, and chuckle at it and just realize how silly it is and realize how, it's tried to serve an important role in your life to protect you, right? Because of the conditioning throughout childhood, throughout society. But it's so silly. It's so silly. And it needs to reinforce itself because the ego is illusory by its very nature. So this is how the inner critic, the egoic inner critic, can reinforce itself and its very existence. So when you can just not try to make it disappear, but just acknowledge that it's not you, that it's just a part of you, that it sometimes says some silly things. It's just trying to look out for you. It's doing the best it can. And then lastly, is change your intention. Redefine your worth from what you achieve or what you collect. Redefine it as your inherent value, like that newborn baby or like that infant child that I was speaking to you about, that, you hold in your hands and you realize, oh my God, like you not only are you good enough, you're more than good enough. You are that. So have awareness, have compassion for yourself, separate yourself from it, change your intention. Some practical steps that you can take as well today is maybe in your journal, ask yourself, where did I first learn that I wasn't enough? Where did I get that idea from? And as a living meditation or a daily practice is praise yourself for being, for who you are, for the kind, loving, compassionate, caring, gregarious, friendly, beautiful human being that you are. not what you do, not what you achieve, right? And a fun thought experiment for you to think about as well, which I'll leave you with, is would I still be worthy if I did nothing today? Would I still be worthy if I did nothing today? Okay. With that, let's bring this in for a landing. Thanks so much for sticking with me this whole time. It's such a blessing to be in this conversation with you and, yeah, to hopefully support you in whatever way I can. With that said, you were never broken. You've always been enough. You were just taught, like me, to chase worth outside of yourself. And, yeah, I really appreciate you for being here. So, lots of love. And have a beautiful day. Hey, it's David. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. I hope something in today's episode landed for you in a way that brings just a little bit more peace or clarity to your week. If you want to go deeper into the ideas we talked about on Liberated today, you can head over to davidtiteu.com. That's davidtiteu.com, or just tap the link in the show notes. That's where you'll find free resources, new episodes, and tools to help you keep doing this very important inner work between listens. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need it too. It's one of the easiest ways to pay it forward and to start a real conversation that matters. So thanks again for being here, and please remember, you were always enough. Can't wait to see you in the next episode. Ciao bella.